Wanted to do a short video on the problem I had with my welder. That's a Miller Bobcat 250. What's different than a lot of these is this one runs off propane, which definitely has its pros and cons. The only reason I got it was there was a guy that was needing money and was moving, and he offered it to me as a really good deal. And I thought, if nothing else, I can buy it and turn around and sell it and make a good bit of money off of it for what I paid for it. But anyways, I've kept it. I don't hardly ever use it, but it's one of those things where if I get rid of it, I'll kick myself for not keeping it. Because it is nice to have a mobile welder and also have an 11,000 watt generator that I could power my whole house with if need be. But it sits over here in the corner of the barn, and I never have any problem starting the thing. Crank it over, and it fires right up usually all the time. I've never had a problem with it. Not usually, never. Well, anyways, I went to use it the other day, and cranked and cranked and cranked. Wouldn't start. The tank I had, the propane tank, was same as empty. I thought, well, it's empty. I'll go get another tank. Got another tank, still nothing. And we've got some rat problems in this barn because we keep animal feed in here. We feed animals out of here. And so therefore I had noticed where there had been some rat activity, mouse activity, and you could see remnants of a nest built in there. And I thought, I'm sure that this is the cause of the problem. So I really didn't know anything about the whole propane setup. Thankfully, between a friend of mine that used to do service work, he did a lot of work on forklifts and different things like that, and it's a similar setup. He was able to help me out a little bit. There's not much on YouTube about these things. I mean, people do reviews on them, but I couldn't find any videos where they were installing a propane kit or having problems with the propane. So that's why I'm doing this video, is to show you a little bit of how this works and what my problem was. So anyways, right here, this is the hose that screws onto your tank. And this takes a tank just like a forklift would, only it needs to lay down horizontally. Just like a forklift, you see them mounted behind the seat, laying down. This has to lay down whenever you're using it. And so you hook that up, and then this is the line coming from your propane tank, and it comes up to this, which I wasn't even sure what that was at first, but it is a lock-off valve, and the way I understand it, there's a filter built in there. So whenever the switch is turned off, this doesn't have power going to it, and therefore it shuts off to where gas cannot continue into the carburetor and into the engine. I did not know that. This is called a vaporizer. So the gas comes in, or the liquid propane, the liquid propane comes in, and this is your vaporizer. This turns it into a gas before it goes into the carburetor. And I hope I'm explaining this right. Then from there, it comes down to your regulator, because from my understanding, these tanks, it's got about 200 psi on them, or coming out of the tank. So this regulates it down to a very, very low pressure that feeds into your carburetor underneath the air cleaner. Well, first I thought it was a regulator. They say that they can get dirt and stuff in there, and so I took this apart. There's a little bit of oil in there, which can cause gunked up, and the diaphragm looked good, so I didn't think that was the problem. And so then I got to looking, and one morning I was over here feeding, and I seen back in here, there was a wire hanging down, and it was broke or chewed in half. And my flashlight went dead, and so I wasn't really able to see where it was coming from. And I thought, well, I'll just have to address that later. But I got a really good picture of this and a really good picture of this because I was wanting to research online what they were. And I was trying to find an instruction manual on how you install one of these propane kits, because you can buy these and put on a regular Miller 250 if you've got a gasoline model. But all the places that sold them, they didn't list the instructions online that you could download them. So anyways, figured out this is the vaporizer, figured out this was a lock-off valve. When I Googled this model 152, I just put in model 152 propane, and I think I left it at that. These things popped up everywhere, and it's a lock-off valve. And in the pictures, it showed 2 wires coming out of the back, which you can't really see, but right in front of my finger is a little black square piece that's mounted to the back of this and has 2 wires coming out of it. And I thought that's got to be where that wire is coming from. So whenever I inspected a little bit further, figured out that it was a ground wire that was broke. You've got, sorry, this wire here runs over and comes into the back. That's your hot wire coming off of, I believe that's your oil pressure switch. So it will not allow this to open, to run, if your oil pressure is low. That's your safety switch. So that's feeding power to this, or a signal, and it was a ground wire that was chewed in half, which back in behind the oil filter there is where the bolt is that the ground wire hooks to. So this morning, I got a longer piece of wire because it is a teetotal bear to get this unit off. I tried, and I just decided I could get down in here and splice in another piece of wire, and I put a connector right here just in case this was bad and not just a broken wire. If I had to replace it, I could just unplug it from that wire, and I wouldn't have to unhook from that ground wire way back in behind that oil filter. So anyways, I got that hooked up, put the propane to it, and it fired right up. So that's how these propane things are set up. Like I said, there's not much on YouTube about them, and that's why I decided to do a video, is to hopefully be able to help somebody else out. The propane has its pros because you can run it indoors and not have the fumes. Also, if it's like in this situation, I don't use this welder very much. I don't have to worry about gas sitting in the carburetor or in the fuel lines going bad, and then I've got gunked up carburetor and everything. You don't have to worry about that with propane. I have looked at a dual fuel setup for this to where I could run propane or gas, which I'd have to get a fuel tank because there's no fuel tank on this one. It has the spot in the top part right there. But I thought about doing that just for the convenience to where I'd have that option. But I hope this helps somebody understand how this propane setup works, and if your welder won't start, that right there ought to help you narrow it down a little bit better why it won't start. Because from my understanding, these propane setups are pretty simple setup and easy to work on. So I hope this helps somebody.